Have you ever, really stopped to think about capital punishment? I mean, beyond just the headlines.
It's a heavy topic.
Definitely. We've been looking at this fascinating YouTube discussion, and we wanted to sort of unpack the whole complex issue for you.
Right. Capital punishment, or the death penalty, as most people know it, it's basically when a judge sentences someone to death for a crime they've committed.
And it's hugely debated, isn't it? Laws are different all over the world, even, state by state within the U.S.
Exactly. It's definitely not straightforward.
So our goal here in this deep dive is really to explore the arguments, both for and against capital punishment, specifically as they came up in this YouTube discussion we looked at.
Yeah, trying to get past the sort of surface noise and understand the core issues and maybe some surprising points that came up.
Exactly. We want to look at the different angles, the nuances, but without, us taking sides. The idea is to help you understand the different perspectives.
And the source itself is interesting. It's a transcript from an English learning YouTube channel. They actually had a dialogue debating the death penalty.
Which makes it quite an accessible way into, well, a very serious conversation.
Absolutely. So the discussion in that transcript, it kicks off with this idea for being tougher on crime generally.
Okay, what did that involve?
Well, it included bringing back the death penalty, specifically for murder, but also things like longer prison sentences for lesser crimes, and even locking up more juvenile offenders, young people.
Wow, okay. That's quite a stance. And how was that received in the dialogue?
Well, the immediate reaction was to call them draconian measures.
Draconian, that's a strong word. Means like excessively harsh or severe, right?
Exactly. So right from the start, it frames these ideas as pretty extreme. It kind of sets the stage for a more critical look.
It does. And I guess one of the big arguments against capital punishment that comes up early is, well, what if the system makes a mistake?
Ah, the irreversible error. Miscarriages of justice. That's a huge point against it.
Right. The dialogue really hammers this home if an innocent person is executed. Well, you can't undo that.
No, you can't. It's the ultimate wrongful conviction, as they call it. Where a court finds someone guilty, but they actually didn't do it.
And the scary part highlighted in the discussion is that these wrongful convictions, they can happen even when the authorities seem absolutely certain.
Mm-hmm. The transcript mentions how evidence might just be unreliable or, and this is pretty disturbing, potentially even fabricated by the police.
Fabricated, so faked.
Yeah.
Made up.
Completely made up. It really makes you question the fallibility of any human justice system, doesn't it? Especially when the stakes are life and death.
It really does. So the conversation then shifts a bit, looking at those longer prison sentences as a possible deterrent.
Right. The idea that the threat of a long time in prison might stop people from committing serious crimes in the first place. A deterrent.
But there was a counter-argument straight away in the dialogue.
Yes, exactly. It basically questions how effective longer sentences really are if the detection rate is so low.
Detection rate, meaning the chances of actually getting caught.
Precisely. The logic is, if criminals think they probably won't get caught anyway, does it really matter how long the sentence might be?
I see. So the fear of getting caught might be more important than the fear of the punishment itself.
That's the suggestion, that
Yeah.
maybe focusing on, making criminals believe they will be apprehended could be more effective at preventing crime than just making sentences harsher after the fact.
Interesting. Okay, and what about the point on juvenile criminals locking up more young offenders?
Yeah, the reasoning given for that was basically to teach them they can't get away with it.
Get away with it, meaning like do something wrong and face no consequences.
Exactly. That phrase comes up again later when they discuss the language. The idea presented was that hitting them hard early on would stop them becoming adult criminals.
But there was a flip side to that argument too, wasn't there? Something about prisons being...
Schools for criminals. Yes, that's the opposing view.
Okay, what's the thinking there?
Well, the concern is that putting young people, especially, into prison might actually backfire. Instead of reforming them, they could end up learning more about crime from experienced inmates, getting drawn deeper into that life.
So incarceration might actually make things worse, not better, in some cases.
That's the worry. It could entrench criminal behavior rather than deter it.
That's a really critical point. The discussion then seemed to broaden out, didn't it, to this more fundamental question about society's whole approach.
Yeah, it contrasted two basic approaches. One is relying on tougher laws and punishments, basically governing through fear, of punishment.
And the other.
The other is trying to tackle the underlying causes of crime, trying to, remove the reasons people commit crimes in the first place, hoping to build a society based more on people's own consciousness of doing the right thing.
That's a really stark contrast, fear versus conscience, almost.
It is. And the dialogue uses this quite provocative comparison. It likens the fear-based approach to a dictator who wants order, but imposes it through force and intimidation.
Impose, meaning like forcing their will onto people.
Exactly, putting rules in place by force. It raises deep questions about the kind of society we want to live in.
Definitely. So moving specifically back to the death penalty, the dialogue brought up both philosophical and practical objections.
Yes. Philosophically, there's the argument about contradiction. Society says murder is wrong, but then uses killing as a punishment. The phrase used later sums it up. You can't right a wrong with another wrong.
That's a classic ethical argument.
Yeah.
And the practical issues.
Well, the big one mentioned is overcrowded prisons. They cite this statistic about 1% of the U.S. population being incarcerated.
1%. That's huge.
A staggering number. And of course, that leads directly to the cost.
Yes, the financial burden.
They mentioned a figure, something like $12,000 per inmate per year, which raises difficult questions about life sentences, especially with prisons already full. What do we do?
It's a massive practical challenge. And did they put the U.S. situation in like a global context?
They did, briefly, pointing out that among the top 20 developed nations, the U.S. is quite an outlier in its continued use of the death penalty.
An outlier, meaning it stands apart from the others.
Yeah. It really underscores that this is a divisive topic.
Yeah.
Something that causes really strong disagreement, not just in the U.S., but internationally, too.
It seems like it. Before we wrap up, maybe we should quickly touch on those language points they highlighted. They seemed quite useful.
Good idea. That phrase, miscarriage of justice, came up again.
Right. And the explanation was interesting, seeing it as a metaphor, like justice failing its objective, similar to how a medical miscarriage means a pregnancy didn't reach its intended outcome.
Exactly. It helps understand the weight of the term than there was in my reckoning.
Which is just another way to say it.
In my opinion, basically. Or, as I see it, just a way people frame their viewpoint on these complex things.
Got it. And finally, get away with something.
Yeah. Circling back to criminals avoiding punishment. It connects right back to that whole deterrence versus detection rate argument we talked about earlier.
Great. It all ties together.
I mean, when you boil it all down, this whole discussion, it really highlights this central tension, doesn't it? Between the idea of the ultimate punishment for the worst crimes and, well, all these serious worries about fairness, about potential errors, about whether it even works as a deterrent, and what it says about our society's values.
Yeah, it's clear from all the points raised in that YouTube dialogue, it's incredibly multifaceted. There are deeply held beliefs on all sides and huge practical things to consider.
Definitely not a simple yes or no issue.
Yeah.
Far from it.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over.
Given everything we've discussed, the potential for mistakes in any justice system, the complexities of actually preventing crime, what do you think is the most just and crucially, the most effective way for society to respond to really serious offenses?
Something to really think about.
Let listen the dialogue about the topic.
Hello, English learners. Welcome back to English Pod. My name is Marco.
And my name is Catherine, and today we're talking about something very serious.
Very serious. Today we're talking about capital punishment.
So if you've never heard that phrase before, you might have heard another name for this topic. It's called the death penalty.
Right. So if you commit a crime, and basically the judge says that you will have to be put to death for that crime.
All right, so many countries no longer have this law. The United States, you can see it in some places, some states, but not in others. So what we're talking about today is the debate between to have the death penalty and to not have it.
All right, so we're going to actually have a little debate in the end of if we agree that we should have the death penalty or not. But before that, why don't we listen to this dialogue for the first time?
That's all for today's class. We will continue our lecture on crime and punishment tomorrow.
Do you think we should be tougher on crime?
Well, it depends on what you mean.
For example, we could bring back the death penalty for murder, give longer prison sentences for lesser offenses, and lock up juvenile offenders.
Those sound like really draconian measures. Firstly, what do you do about miscarriages of justice if you've already put innocent people to death?
You'd only use capital punishment if you were absolutely sure that you convicted the right person.
But there have been many cases of wrongful conviction where people have been imprisoned for many years. The authorities were sure at the time, but later it was shown that the evidence was unreliable. In some cases, it had been fabricated by the police.
Well, no system of justice can be perfect, but surely there's a good case for longer prison sentences to deter serious crime.
I doubt whether they could act as an effective deterrent while the detection rate is so low. The best way to prevent crime is to convince people who commit it that they're going to be caught. It doesn't make sense to divert all your resources into the prison system.
But if you detect more crimes, you'll still need prisons. In my reckoning, if we could lock up more juvenile criminals, they'd learn that they can't get away with it. Soft sentences will merely encourage them to do it again.
Yes, but remember that prisons are often schools for criminals. To remove crime from society, you really have to tackle its causes.
Well, if I were president, I would impose tougher laws and punishment. I would have a peaceful society based on fear of punishment, not consciousness of doing the right thing.
You sound like a dictator.
Well, if it works, why not? All right, so Marco, there's a lot of really great legal terms here, legal and crime terms. And so let's look at a few of these in today's language takeaway.
Language takeaway.
All right, so let's take a look at the first one. They mentioned juvenile offenders.
All right, so let's look at these two words because, offender can be pretty general. It's someone who commits a crime. Mm-hmm. So an offender. But we're talking about a special kind of offender. Here we're talking about juvenile offenders.
Mm-hmm. So they're young offenders.
Right, and in America, legally, you're a juvenile offender if you're under the age of 18.
Okay, so if you commit a crime while you are a juvenile, you get judged differently, right? You don't get the same treatment as an adult.
Right. Usually the punishments are not as harsh because people like to think that younger people, younger children or teenagers, they don't really understand the law. They don't really understand crime or good and bad. So it should be easier on them.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. So we have juvenile offenders and we also have wrongful conviction.
All right, this is an uh-oh moment for a judge because a wrongful conviction, well, conviction, first of all, is a decision. So this is a court's decision on whether or not a person is guilty.
So you convicted the person.
Right. Marco was convicted guilty of stealing my computer.
I was too. That happened.
Okay. Right. But it's a wrongful conviction if Marco didn't really steal a computer, but we decided that he did.
Okay. So it was a wrong decision.
Right. It was a bad decision in the sense that it's actually not what happened in reality.
Mm-hmm. A wrongful conviction. Very good. And actually related to a wrongful conviction, many times it happens because evidence is fabricated by the police.
All right. So this is a big no-no. This is something that really shouldn't happen, and it's against the law in many countries. So fabrication, or to fabricate, is to fake, to make something up.
Mm-hmm.
And so evidence that's fabricated is evidence that the police or other people create to try and make someone look guilty, but it's not actually evidence. It's not really...
it's not true.
It's not true.
Right.
Yeah.
And now moving on, they were talking about a deterrent for crime.
Okay, so to deter is a verb. To deter means to try and get someone to not do something. All right? So I'm going to try and deter my staff from taking early lunch breaks. Okay. So I'm going to punish someone as a deterrent.
As a deterrent. Okay, so you have the verb deter and you have the noun a deterrent.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so oftentimes very strict laws are meant to be deterrents. They're meant to keep people from doing bad things, from breaking the law.
All right, so for example, capital punishment is one of those deterrents. If you kill somebody, then if you get caught, you are also going to be killed.
So that means I'm never going to kill anyone because I don't want the law to decide that I'm going to get killed.
Exactly. And our last word for today, they were talking about imposing tougher laws. I would impose tougher laws.
Okay, so to impose is a verb that means to put in place or to set up or enact. And so,
but by force, right? You don't really agree to do it.
Like the dictator imposes his will. Mm-hmm. All right, so he makes everyone do what he wants. But we can impose measures that do something. It's kind of like forcibly making people follow some kind of rule or or follow a person.
Now, sometimes you would see that you have a company or you have people at your house and they're like, well, stay over for dinner. And they're like, oh, I wouldn't want to impose.
All right, so I wouldn't want to bother you, or I wouldn't want to create more work for you. Because, when you're making food, you have all these people, they don't want to impose on you.
All right, so that's another way of using this, impose on somebody. All right, so after all of these words that we've taken a look at, why don't we start now with Fluency Builder?
Fluency Builder.
Okay, so as you know, Fluency Builder is a place where you get to talk about some phrases and words that allow you to be more fluent in English. So these are sometimes idioms or sometimes phrases, words that go together commonly. And the first one is no exception. It's a miscarriage. So miscarriage of justice.
All right, a miscarriage of justice. Now we have different words here. The first one, miscarriage, it's usually related to a medical term.
Right, it's a pregnancy. Well, it's a pregnancy that has a sad result. It's a pregnancy where the woman's baby dies or the woman loses the baby. And a miscarriage of justice is a metaphor. It's a way to say that justice was not carried out. It means that, for example, with those wrongful convictions, the law failed
to accomplish its objective.
Yeah, to accomplish its objective and to be fair.
Okay, so a miscarriage of justice. Interesting. And moving on to our next phrase, they were talking and discussing this whole death penalty situation, and she mentioned, in my reckoning.
All right, so this is a great way to share your opinion or your idea with someone. You're saying pretty much, in my opinion, according to me, or, the way I'm thinking is this.
So I can also say, I reckon, right?
Exactly. I reckon it's going to rain later. I think it's going to rain. So in my reckoning, in my opinion.
All right. I reckon. And to finish off Fluency Builder, they said that the person or the criminal couldn't get away with it.
All right, so this is another one of those phrases that each word maybe means something different. You can get somewhere, but put together, to get away with something means to do something bad or illegal or that's not okay without getting caught.
Or being punished.
So
you can say, get away with murder.
He got away with murder. He did something that was really, really bad, but no one caught him.
And also it means the criminal got away, so they couldn't catch him.
Right, or I could always say to my brother, he would always lie to my parents and get away with it. So that he never got caught, he never got punished.
Okay, so he got away with his lie, or got his way.
Right.
All right, so I think this is an interesting phrase. Why don't we listen to a couple of more examples?
Example 1.
Do you think we could get away with using the cheaper product?
Example 2.
Thieves got away with 2 Picassos, which were never found.
Example 3.
He almost got away with murder. Unfortunately for him, the police discovered his secret.
So we've taken a look at a lot of great phrases. Why don't we listen to our dialogue for the last time, and then we'll come back.
That's all for today's class. We will continue our lecture on crime and punishment tomorrow.
Do you think we should be tougher on crime?
Well, it depends on what you mean.
For example, we could bring back the death penalty for murder, give longer prison sentences for lesser offenses, and lock up juvenile offenders.
Those sound like really draconian measures. Firstly, what do you do about miscarriages of justice if you've already put innocent people to death?
You'd only use capital punishment if you were absolutely sure that you convicted the right person.
But there have been many cases of wrongful conviction where people have been imprisoned for many years. The authorities were sure at the time, but later it was shown that the evidence was unreliable. In some cases, it had been fabricated by the police.
Well, no system of justice can be perfect, but surely there's a good case for longer prison sentences to deter serious crime.
I doubt whether they could act as an effective deterrent while the detection rate is so low. The best way to prevent crime is to convince people who commit it that they're going to be caught. It doesn't make sense to divert all your resources into the prison system.
But if you detect more crimes, you'll still need prisons. In my reckoning, if we could lock up more juvenile criminals, they'd learn that they can't get away with it. Soft sentences will merely encourage them to do it again.
Yes, but remember that prisons are often schools for criminals. To remove crime from society, you really have to tackle its causes.
Well, if I were president, I would impose tougher laws and punishment. I would have a peaceful society based on fear of punishment, not consciousness of doing the right thing.
You sound like a dictator.
Well, if it works, why not?
All right, so now the big question, Catherine. Do you agree with the death penalty?
Oh, this is a big one, and I don't think we have enough time to go into it in much detail here, but I definitely think that is extreme, right? And so we have this phrase, draconian measures.
Right,
and I
they
think,
mentioned that in the dialogue.
yeah, so draconian, something that's draconian is excessive or severe, you know? And I think that there are a lot of reasons not to have the death penalty, because the death penalty, well, you're pretty much saying, we as a society think that murder is wrong, but we're going to show you that you've done a wrong thing, like a bad thing that's against the law, by killing you. All right, and so I have to disagree with that on a philosophical level.
But what about practical?
Practically speaking, I think that there are a lot of problems with the prison system and the legal system in the United States, for example, because prisons are really crowded. 1% of the American population is in prison. And so I think that so long as the prison system still has problems, there's a really good argument for having the death penalty. But still, I think that it's excessive and it's unnecessary and that there are other ways to treat and punish prisoners.
It is an interesting topic because you have many different angles that are in favor or against the death penalty. For example, you have religious views where you say that you should not take a life of another person no matter what. Or you have other views that say that the death penalty is simply wrong and that you can't right a wrong with another wrong.
Right, exactly.
So it kind of doesn't make sense. But at the same time, you do, like you say, the prisons are full of people and it costs around, I think it's $12,000 a year per person to keep them in prison. So what do you do with all of these people that have life sentences that are going to spend the rest of their lives in jail? So it is interesting. And many countries are very, very strict with their legal system in comparison with the United States, right?
Definitely, but there is a statistic that's pretty stunning that I think among the top 20 developed nations in the world, I think only the United States is the one with the death penalty.
Exactly. And actually the ratio of people compared to the population that are in jail is much higher in the United States than in other countries.
That's true.
So it is a very questionable topic, but we want to know what you think. Do you think that the death penalty is a justifiable way to do justice? Or do you think maybe it's just wrong and we shouldn't have it anymore?